Chapter 1. My Quiet Confession. The voice had been in my head most of my life. I am not enough. He hoisted me up on his lap, and my 12-year-old scrawny legs dangled over the arms of his worn plaid retainers. Daddy is a dreamer, and this is where we dream. His 6-foot frame easily collapsed the chair into position. The two of us stare at the popcorn ceiling and analyze the world together. Any boys paying attention to you, Jennie? I offer a giggle because that was a silly thought at 12. Soon after, boys would become the object of my most obsessive interest, but not yet. Not only was I lanky, but my grandmother had cut my hair to the nab only a year before. I'm sure her intention wasn't as unkind as it felt. Then she cocked her head and decided it would look better with the perm. My elegant, silver-haired grandmother and my 5th grade self had matching hairdos. So no, Dad, there was no boys. Well, except for Henry, whose blonde mop of his hair was wilder than his behavior. After my tragic 5th grade hair incident, Henry kindly asked if my hair has been sucked up by a vacuum cleaner. Yep, that still stings a bit. Daddy and I dream and wonder. Grades, friends, sports, boys. He read off subjects as they were part of a secret thing daddies everywhere are given to ask their daughters when it comes to difficult to converse with them. The list wasn't meant to categorize all his expectations. He was just checking in, helping his awkward little darted-eyed daughter set goals and find her place. Mostly, he was prying, though I only knew it now that I parent a few 12-year-olds of my own. He couldn't have known that, and at the time, my little firstborn brain was racing to assimilate the list, and with it, making notes of a line just beyond my reach. A thick black finish line that marked the place I would achieve this growing list of imagined unachievable expectation. That line would wait indefinitely in the distant border of my mind, enticing me to reach for it. Within me, for most of my life, would live a theory that I assumed was a fact. It was possible to arrive at a destination where I was finally proving myself. I would arrive at a line mark, the place where I finally measured up to my family, my peers, my God, and my own expectation. But like the margin in the desert, everything I thought I was doing in closing, the line backed itself up. It all started before I was old enough to notice or be noticed by the boys. When the thought first occurred to me, I was not enough. During my freshman year at the University of Arkansas, some friends convinced me into joining them in a long line of the Razorback cheering tryouts. Obviously, I was not going to make it. I wasn't much of an athlete. There was the one season of soccer in 1st grade. Then I tried to run track one year, and yet failed miserably. After running the 800-mile in my first meet, I did take gymnastics, but I never made the cheerleader squad until my senior year of high school. I didn't know if I was good enough, or if I made myself so obnoxiously nervous that I didn't smile. In any cases, I knew I wasn't going to make it on the college level, but it felt fun to pretend for a few days that I could. Growing up in Arkansas, I'd gone with my dad to so many Razorback games. And what did I do? I didn't watch boys and pad on the field. Along with a lot of the other girls in the stadium, I memorized every move the cheerleaders made. Now here I was standing in line with some of the most darningly athletic girls I ever seen, all wearing their National Cheerleaders Association instructor shirt. They held resumes listing every awards they ever won, and each special team they graced. I had no resume. One year as a high school cheerleader didn't even make a resume. I almost walked away, but I stayed. Despite my lack of resume, I somehow accidentally made cheerleader in college. Now I realize you may be putting off by these randomly stories from my early life with blonde boys named Henry and cheerleading tryouts, but hang with me. The world doesn't wait until you reach a certain age to issue an identity. From childhood, we begin defining ourselves by the loudest message. With a red little hug on my face and a tiny uniform and inadequate and fear as near as dear companions, I arrived at my first practice along the other girls who deserved to be here. I felt like a fraud. Add to that, despite my remarkably height of 5'3", somehow, in the world of college cheerleaders, I was the tallest. It all just feels like a tremendous mistake. Our coach led us to the 2nd floor of the gym. We would soon call home from 3 to 4 hours each day. The 2nd floor stretched out down a long white hall with doors leading to offices. The only thing visible at the end was a medical scale. We lined up and stood on the rickety metal scale. The coach had a clipboard and scribbled down our weight, besides each name. She would go on and do this every 6 weeks for the next several years of my life. If our weight crept up from the point more than a few pounds, the coach would tell us to lose weight or be benched. This only happened to me once. Then a little girl who never felt lovely enough met a college career of scales and began to deep tailspin into a 5-year eating disorder, an obsession to try to control her appearance, all because of a dark, familiar line in the distance reminding her, I am not enough. People don't think about you as much as you do, my practical mom used to assure me when I was in 7th grade, and built massive conspiracy theories about why I didn't get invited to crucial social events such as someone's end-of-the-year sleepover. She meant it to be comforting, and strangely, it was. I never wanted to be the object of people's thought. It seemed too risky when my oxygen was their approval. Then I became a pastor's wife, and guess what? My mom's middle school statement failed me, because people definitely thought about me more than I wished they did. Whether our kids attend public or private school, how much we spend our money, how our kids behave, who our friends were, how my husband was leading, and even what attire he wore. All these topics and more were recently brought to my attention or questioned. Most weekends, my husband Zach was busy preparing sermons, and every Sunday morning he had gone before I was awake. Usually Connor, my oldest, was up first, and the other 2 kids would follow. Each week brought renewed fights over brushed hairs and teeth, and what everyone should wear. And eventually I gave up the ideal concept, such as hair bows. My earnest dream was to arrive at church on time, but it was rarely realized. Eventually, kids were wrangled into their Sunday school churches, and I began to walk down the hall to the meet and greet called church. I've been great at meet and greets, but not as a pastor's wife. I come to fear them. You may find it helpful to know that I have a condition called attention-deflected disorder. I know a lot of people would joke about having ADD, but for those of us who actually have it, our brain works different than everyone else. My ADD makes it hard to focus on rooms full of people. I guess most people's brain can ignore the other conversations happening. The crying baby, the worship that is already starting in the gym, and footsteps coming behind you. But I can't. I hear everything. ADD brain has 2 modes. One's that's hyper-focus, the ability to zero in on one thing so completely that it is as if not one other thing exists on the earth, as if I was the complete other world. The other mode is the brain moves so quickly from one thing to the next that it's impossible to focus on anything. If I am in control of the situation, for instance, you and I having a conversation over coffee, I could turn on my hyper-focused drive and you would never know I have ADD, but meet and greet is torturous to my mind. A simple conversation becomes a daunting challenge, especially after managing 3 kids all morning. Each Sunday after dropping off the kids, I would walk down the hall of our church plants, full of dread. The people were not the problem. I adore the people. Their seemingly expectations of me were the problem. I desperately wanted to prove that I was an asset to Zach, and in the way I cared for our people. When we plant a church, there are no buildings, no programs, no history to help visitors assess whether their church is a good fit. So people often decide if they want to stay based on the pastor and his vision and his wife. Do we trust the pastor and his wife? Do we like them? Can we follow them? I knew that every week in our small growing church, most people were asking themselves this question. Todd must have passed me in the hall when I was full of dread. He likely said hi to me and smiled. I didn't smile back because I didn't hear him say hi. One week I got a call from Todd's wife. Are you upset with us? Nothing could be further from the truth. They were one of our easiest friends. Why was Rachel asking me this? Rachel went on. Todd said he was trying to speak to you several times on Sunday morning in the hallway, and you always ignored him. Trust me, passive-aggressive is just not my street. If anything, I am probably too direct when something is bothering me. Of course, I wasn't mad at ignoring Tom, but how can I explain all the pressure I felt on Sunday to measure up and perform? How can I describe what it feels like to walk into church and 3 barely just kids and a church full of people deciding if they are enough? How could I tell her I have ADD, and I didn't even hear Tom multiple weeks in a row? So I didn't. I just apologized and assured her we were great. But from that point on, when I walked in the hall, I added to my growing list of pressure-soaked to-dos, smile and say hi to every person I passed. I was not enough. My kids' school had sent me an email asking them to meet. Across from me, 3 administrators sat with prepared notes, and I sat helpless, completely ill-prepared. Your child is next succeeding, and we wonder if he's getting the help he needs at school. We know you work and travel a lot. We know you are all busy. While the words were said kindly, they expressed my greatest fear. I am not enough. I am not doing enough. I am not measuring up as a mother. My child is not measuring up, and it is my fault. I ached to offer my genuine explanation. I could not love this child any more than I do. I am always helping him with schoolwork. Oh, how I pray for him. I have missed so much work trying to get him the right help. I didn't say anything. Instead, I fought back tears and sniffled all of my adequate defenses. I listened. I asked questions, and then I walked out, collapsed in tears in the driver's seat of my car. I couldn't breathe. I drove home and ran past Zach, who looked at me to ask who was going to take Kate, our 14-year-old, to track practice. I couldn't answer. I was just looking for somewhere to hide. I laid on the floor of my closet, grabbed a dirty t-shirt from the floor, and hid my face in it. I cried harder than any human should. When I finally took a deep breath and dried the tears and opened my eyes, my first thought was, dang, my closet is a mess. My breath was gone and the tears in the t-shirt was back. Leave it to a disaster of a closet to push me over the edge. I was not enough. For so many years, the voices had been in my head. I am not enough. Is it possible you can hear that same voice? Maybe you never struggled with the eating disorder or the pressures of being a pastor's wife, but I'm convinced nearly all of us feel this incredible pressure to prove we measure up in some way. Every morning we face the list of undone things the previous night, the expectations of our families and coworkers, and glorious, ideal humans that we convince the world the church and God requires. We sense that somewhere with everyone is watching with an ominous scale and a clipboard recording our results. We all face feelings of inadequacy. We walk around desperately afraid we don't measure up. We slap on self-esteem strategies that feel a little like playing dress-up when we were 7. We think that we are growing someone up and lovely and achieve, and we want to be someone grown up and lovely and achieve. But deep in our morals, we know it's pretend. We are not enough. So we spend our lives trying to shift that reality. God has a different storyline for us, one in which our souls are content and epic stories unfold throughout our lives, but not only because of us, in spite of us. Romans is very clear about our reality, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. But what if we have everything backwards? What if there was a story where the ones who aren't good enough, the ones who are recognized they don't measure up, are the ones that God of the universe picked to move wildly in and through? What if I told you today you could stop trying so hard and simply rest? What if I told you today you could start enjoying yourself and your life without performing or striving for another minute? What if I told you that you don't measure up and that it's okay? In fact, it's necessary. I didn't go out looking for a big vision in my life. I woke up the night of my 30th birthday and couldn't sleep. I couldn't shake off the phrase spinning in my head. Disciple a generation? It was a silly thought. I was a mom of young kids and a pastor's wife of a small church. I didn't have a platform or influence. I didn't even have a Twitter account. What was I supposed to do with this? I remember for 2 days it felt as my bones hurt. I mentioned it to a few good friends who widely told me, if this is God, Jennie, He will make it happen. I agreed there's no clear step to take, so I laid with that burden aside and moved on with my already full life. Then a few years later, my husband and I began a simple prayer. Anything, God. Convicted by the life of Kaylee Davis, she was living in Ogren and adopted multiple girls off the street, laying down her life in a way it was contagious. We surrendered every part to Jesus in more terrifying, absolute way than we ever before. Anything, Jesus. We prayed it and got initially the kind of events my friends had said to wait on. God started to open the doors I wasn't even knocking on. I've been teaching a Bible study in my home for years, but I knew I had held back and kept it small, always inviting only a few safe friends. But goodness, I love teaching the Bible. I always have. The moment I came home from Sunday camp after trusting Jesus, I seemingly instantly gathered a handful of younger girls and started teaching them about the book of Revelation. Hysterical. I know now that probably that wasn't the best choice, but teaching the Bible was and is like breathing for me. Yet navigating the pressures of a pastor's wife seemed enough, and choosing more leadership seems terrifying because leading always coexists tightly with criticism. My skin was so desperately thin, but I knew I wanted to please God and quit living in other people's opinion. So in the fall of 2009, for the first time I took the risk of opening the doors of our study to any woman who wanted to attend. While I taught Struck, a study I had written for some women in the living room, they came, 150 people from different backgrounds and ages came together. People trusted Jesus for the first time. Women were freed of bondage they fought for decades, and they started to have their own convictions and dreams to serve God. Obedience seemed to be contagious. God was moving into our little corner of the world in a way I've never seen before since college. And only 1 year later, without much effort on my part, I was given opportunities to publish my studies and speak on greatest stages in Christendom. The girls, terrified of 100 people opinions, now would have to face 100,000 of them. These were never the goals or dreams I had. God was shoving me out of my comfort zone I craved. I didn't want to deal with opinions and judgment. I didn't want to risk appearing ignorant. I didn't want to make Zach uncomfortable. I didn't want to miss the familiar, easy rhythm I enjoy with my kids. Yet the words disciple a generation continued to echo in me. I couldn't shake off the sense that God was causing these opportunities to unfold for purposes beyond my understanding, and certainly beyond my fears. I began having small, slightly insignificant conversations, in which I shared some of my hopes and dreams I felt stirring. The question I couldn't shake off: if God was real, then how are we going to live like this? And thousands of women around the world responded, drawn to the beauty of it would mean to dream together about how to live. If Gatherings was born. Our first gathering launched to be a sellout, and then women from around the world rose up and rallied to lead gatherings in their homes, churches, and cities. Within a small while, a army of women was coming together around with the name of Jesus to use their gifts and spend their lives discipling the world. We were hard-working and doing our best to pursue God with excellence, but it was often seen we are making more wrong decisions than the right. Yet despite the chaos of our inexperience and misstep, the visioning was resonating. If was beginning to take a life of its own, and I was mostly just terrified. I desperately afraid I was not equipped to lead this. The world saw a powerful, glorious work of God, uniting women to obey and follow God. But behind the scene, If also was causing us many things I feared. Conflict and personal rejection and disappointment and an overwhelming amount of time and energy requiring to lead this grown mission. I wanted more than just to please God, and yet the intensity of the growing army was pushing me to more and more places I felt ill-equipped to lead, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could pretend to hold this together. I desperately feared that the words always bounced around my head were true. I am not a leader. I am not cut out for this. I cannot do this. God, you picked the wrong girl. I am just not enough. And the more if kept growing, the more I feared that the whole time a lot of people will find that out. 9 years after sleepless night that brought weightiness, conviction, to disciple of this generation, if was just no longer a dream. I found myself behind a curtain peering out at women who came hungry and expecting, wanting more of God. It was the third time together, and now, over 1 million women in more than 100 countries watched and waited for the video broadcast to begin. 6 steps were all that separated me from the stage. It was not helping that one of the biggest stages in the music history, wrapping the back hall of Austin City Limit at the Moody Theater, was an iconic image of the most greatest artists of all times who had commanded the stage. Willie Nelson, Mumford and Sons, Diana Ross, they haunt me, they mock me. This is the music stage of Texas. This is the stage the greats played. They all must have walked the steps with confidence equal to their brilliant talent's gift. I kept staring at the steps and wondering what would happen at the top. When I looked past the heavy black curtains and into the waiting eyes, the world would say to me, "You're successful. You've done it. You are finally enough." Yeah, I'll tell you a secret. As I stood what should have been miles past the thick line of expectation, still loomed, just out of my reach, mocking me. Enough is a mirage that cannot be caught. You and I keep chasing it, or we can quit the childish game the enemy taught us young. In that moment, I could have owned what the world was telling me. It would have been nice to agree for a moment that maybe I have arrived, that I have a confident leader with clear crystal vision. But standing there, I knew I was not brave enough. I knew I was not smart enough. I knew I was not gifted enough. I was not sure enough, strong enough to lead this movement. I knew I was not enough. 6 steps, I walked them up. And that day, rather than pretending I was enough, I stood at the historical stage and I let my quiet confession in front of more than 1 million people. I am not enough. I am done trying to be. It was one of the peaceful and freeing moments of my life. While God may not be prompting you to announce your inequalities from a stage, I'm going to guess that something in your life requires more than you can deliver. Maybe you have a difficult marriage and every day is a struggle. Maybe you're burning debts and unpaid bills. Maybe you have a child with special needs that requires you to wade deeper into complicated paperwork, psychology, psychiatrists, and therapies. Maybe one of your parents is slowly fading. Maybe you feel paralyzed with anxiety or isolated by depression. Whatever it is that you're setting your world reeking, how will you move forward? Striving, pretending, white-knuckling, or free? My dream is that you embrace your worst fears heads on, finding that our God is enough for them. My prayer for you is to start enjoying the freedom that comes when you quit trying to prove ourselves. When we surrender what is out of our control to one who is in control, we strive to be seen, to be known, to matter. We're desperate to believe we are doing a great job of whatever has been entrusted to us. But we are not enough. We are not God. We don't have all the answers, all the wisdom, all the strength, all the energy. We are finite, sinful beings, and that's okay. In fact, it is for confession that unleashes the freedom we are aching for. Until next time, talk soon.